right. Well, first of all, Dr. Mark Lahr, thank you so much for being with us this morning at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. It's a great honor to be able to speak with you. Thank you.
It's nice to be here.
All right. We, as you know, with IPPD, we've been asking questions that have really been focusing on mentorship, traditions, the growth of the program over time. I wonder if we could start a little bit, Dr. Lahr, though, with a little bit about your educational background and if there were any particular mentors that really inspired you.
So after my master's degree, I worked at Hewlett-Packard for about 4 years, and that's really influenced sort of my management and approach to projects as an engineer, because they're famous for doing management by walking around. So not a lot of formal meetings, but kind of a lot of one-on-one informal interactions took place. And, you know, they were one of the first people to do cubicle farms instead of offices. So, you know, everybody had a cubicle. It was a very open environment. And that was very influential to me as an engineer. I got my PhD at Stanford University, and my advisor was very influential on me there. And he was great, particularly for an academic kind of an environment, because he believed it was his responsibility to provide resources, to find great students, put us together and let good things happen, and let us kind of drive the research program with his supply of resources. So I've always kind of taken that approach too, you know, when it comes to management and projects, that, you know, as team leader, you know, you want to get good people around you and then give them the resources they need to succeed.
Mm-hmm. And what was the name of your advisor?
Bob Dutton.
And so my sense is he had worked with a lot of people before you, and then he just continued to be influential in your career?
He was actually a fairly young faculty member at the time. I think he'd been on the faculty, well, probably less than a decade at the point when I started working with him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Now, as you were, and if you wouldn't mind me asking, what was the subject of your dissertation?
So this is always kind of a problem for me at parties, trying to explain what I do. I work on semiconductor materials, which are at the heart of computer chips. So, you know, you've got a microprocessor and memory chips in your laptop, and I'm interested in how the very smallest parts of those chips work, the transistors, and I'm interested in how they're made and manufactured. So that's my research area, is trying to improve the technology underlying the computer microprocessors that you use every day.
Okay, it sounds like an exciting party. That's fascinating.
It's been a good place for 25 years. I've had a pretty good research career involved in that area. Yeah.
Very cool. And can you describe, Dr. Lahr, the process of how you arrived, how you came to the University of Florida?
They offered me a job. That was really important. So I had a real change of heart during my PhD program. Originally, I wanted to go back to industry, and that was my plan until my advisor took a sabbatical. And he said, here, teach this course for a couple of weeks while I'm gone. And I really enjoyed that, and that kind of completely changed my thinking. So I looked only for academic jobs at that point. The person that was responsible for hiring me knew my advisor and was looking for a student kind of with my skill set. So it was a really attractive position because I knew I had a really good fit into a research group here at UF.
Yeah. Oh, great. Now, you were a person who was there at the beginning of the IPPD process. You were part of a task force that was formed to come to a consensus on the program. Can you tell us about that early experience?
Yeah, it was kind of exciting. When I arrived here, you know, I'd not done any undergraduate teaching or involvement whatsoever when I got here. But I was an honors student at my undergraduate institution, and my senior project and research was very involved because that was kind of required for honors students. So I kind of thought that was the norm, and when I got here I discovered that it really wasn't the norm. A lot of our senior design projects were really pretty superficial, if you will. They weren't you know, really in depth. They weren't well organized. They were just sort of a student would play around, maybe build something at the end of the semester, and everybody said, okay, that's good enough. So it wasn't very formal. It didn't have structure. Having spent time in industry, I was used to more structure in the project. So for whatever reason, and I'm not sure how the connection was made, but I ended up on Heinz Friedrich's task force to look at trying to do a better job with senior design experiences for our students. And we spent probably a year talking about how that would work, how we could get industrial sponsorship for the projects and what that might cost and how that money might be used. We talked about how it really needed to be a team experience. That was a very important part of our design. And Heinz Friedrich in particular, having worked at IBM for a very long time, was very firm that it needed to be a really structured thing and that it had to have components that talked about a real industrial design process where you submit early design documents, there's a design review stage, you do prototyping, all the steps that IPPD does now, was part of that whole makeup early in the task force.
What was it like to work with Hans Friedrich in those years?
It was pretty exciting. We were doing something that was really pretty radical, and that at the time, almost all of the almost all of the senior design projects, I should say, were done by individual students with individual faculty. So the standards were all over the map. And here we were talking about having group design projects, which was radical because how could you really know how well the student had done on the design if they weren't doing it by themselves? The classic kind of grading conundrum you have with group work. So that was a kind of a radical thought. These teams would be interdisciplinary, so they would be coming from mechanical and electrical and materials and have components of different types of engineering. So how do you sort out who does what and how? And then the concept of just getting industrial sponsors. I mean, how we were going to do that and sell it to the companies as something, a vehicle that they could support was, all really radical. Also, we were talking about a 2-semester experience. That also was radical at the time. It was only a 1-semester experience in every department. Every department at that point, every degree program had a 1-semester requirement for their senior design capstone. And here we were talking about doubling the credits.
Wow. So
it was kind of energizing in a way because people were seeing possibilities on that task force that had never really existed here.
Wow. Well, you have so much experience, and as you know, academic institutions sometimes are slow to change. How were you able to sell this to faculty, to administrators? Was the power of the idea so powerful it just kind of blew people?
Oh, heck no. No. I think it was sold because it was clear that it was going to be an option for students, that it wasn't going to be required of anybody, that it would substitute for senior design, but departments would still be kind of involved in certifying that it was okay for individual students. So I think a lot of the faculty that were maybe, say, more skeptical about the idea were probably convinced it would just sort of die under its own weight over time. There wouldn't be enough industrial sponsors, students wouldn't want to commit to the extra credits, and, so on and so forth, that, it would just never survive because of those restrictions.
So, and then looking externally, how did you sell this to industrial sponsors, and what were some of the early ones that kind of stick out?
Oh, boy, I don't remember some of the early companies that got involved. I think Harris was one of the first companies, but I'm not 100% certain. The real selling point was, I think we started at 20,000. It's now 25,000 per team, but when we started it, the selling point was you get access to 6 bright, motivated undergraduates who in a year could be joining your place. In fact, you'll get to see them in a working environment over the year. It's a great way to get recruiting kind of information about those kids and perhaps have them as employees eventually. You get the help of a faculty coach because every team got assigned a faculty member to help coach the team. And so you had access to an awful lot of expertise and hours of design effort from a good group of people for a really low price tag.
Right.
So, it was a risk on many companies, but it wasn't a very expensive risk.
Now, Dr. Law, you're in an excellent position to think about the evolution of the program over time. What have been some of the changes over time, or what's the biggest difference between the program now as when it started?
So I think the biggest change is really the acceptance of the program. when we started, as I said, a lot of faculty were skeptical. Well, this is a dumb idea. Students aren't going to get involved. Companies won't pay for it. It's a tremendous time sink for the faculty member to be the coach. A lot of people, I think, did not believe it would succeed. And now it's widely viewed as the crown jewel. This is the place where students should get their senior design experience if they can. It doesn't fit into everybody's schedule. Maybe you're off internshipping or whatever, but this is now viewed as one of the best things about our undergraduate program. So, I would say the perspective on this program has really swung 180 degrees from being, oh, that's kind of a dumb idea, but if you people want to waste your time on it, go ahead, to, wow, this is an incredible program and one of the best values we bring to our students.
What are some of the IPPD time-honored traditions?
I'm a poor one to ask, actually. I've actually never been a coach of an IPPD team.
Okay.
So I'm not involved in the day-to-day running of IPPD. From my perspective, I think one of the big things that I always like, and I haven't been able to go as much in the last couple of years, but they do a design review in February. And the students have to all get dressed up as if they're, interviewing for jobs in suits and ties and, fancy dresses and all the works. And they have to present their idea as a team and talk through it in, 15 minutes with PowerPoint slides and explain what they're doing and where they're at in the design process. And, wow. I think that kind of required professionalism is a really great tradition, because most engineering students underestimate how much they're going to have to present their ideas in front of an audience in the work world. And it's the reality, and they get a real, trial by fire, if you will, in that reality when they're doing those design reviews.
Yeah. It's a great experience for them to have. What are the top attributes of an IPPD coach?
Patience. I think to be a successful coach is really the key word. You're not an instructor. You're not a mentor. You can't tell the team what they need to do. You need to ask probing questions, make sure they've thought about the possibilities, but you're really having to let go, in the sense of a sports coach. You can do some prep. You can talk about design process. You can talk about specifying out part lists, various things. But at the end of the day, the team takes the field, and they use that information or not and succeed, and maybe you can yell some instructions from the sideline. But I think you really need to be a coach in the true sense of the word, in terms of giving the students the ownership of the project. Because if that doesn't happen, it's not as good an experience for the students. If it's about the faculty member doing the work, leading them by the nose, it doesn't work as well. So, you need to let them discover their own mistakes. You can think that they're walking down a blind path, but you really can't tell them that. You need to let them kind of find it on their own and really explore the design space on their own. And sometimes projects fail. Yeah. Not every team wins the national title. Mm-hmm. Some teams go 0-28 or 4-8, perhaps I should say.
Right. Well, and I asked a question in part because thinking about this from a faculty perspective, faculty in a university get into a certain kind of rhythm about teaching, mm-hmm. and how they relate to students. And it sounds to me that IPPD really requires a lot of kind of thinking outside of the box for a faculty member.
Well, I kind of related a little bit to like a PhD student. I mean, typically you have a PhD student with you for a longer period of time. But if they don't get to the point towards the end where they're truly independent and they're bringing to you new ideas that you maybe haven't thought of or new perspectives on the problem, then they haven't really gotten to the end of the PhD project, right? So it's a similar approach, I think, with these teams. You have to get to the point where they own the design and they maybe are doing things you hadn't thought of, and that's part of the real value of the experience.
That's a great value. If you could say one thing to the IPPD community and to future engineers, what would it be?
That this is a tremendous experience for students. I think it's a tremendous experience for companies. And I think the partnership between the students and companies is really powerful. The students know that they're working on a real world problem that somebody cares about, because companies all have to provide a liaison engineer. So the company is providing time from one of their employees to help with the project, help them determine specifications, whatever it may be. So the students get this feeling of importance they don't get anywhere else. And by the same token, I think the companies get tremendous value, because here's 6 students you've gotten to try out for very little cost. And a lot of students end up going to work for their IPPD sponsored companies because they develop a really good relationship.
That's great.
So it's almost like having an internship, but being on campus and able to take other classes at the same time.
Right. Well, we're getting ready. This is the penultimate question before the describe the IPPD program in one word, which has so far been my favorite question. In some ways, you've already been speaking to this, but are there any other ideas you have about what makes the program so special?
Well, I think one of the things, I've talked about a couple already, but I think one of the things that's of real value is the diversity. Students see people from different disciplines, different backgrounds, diversity in a broad sense that they will see in the workplace. Too often it's easy for students to just hang out with fellow students in their major that look like them, that are of the same gender, and this is an opportunity where they're put together in a team where that's not going to be true. They may have to learn how to interface with a female mechanical engineer from rural Florida when they're a male electrical engineer from downtown Orlando. And I think there's real value in kind of learning that you have to have those kinds of experiences and learn how to work with a team, because that's going to be the reality of your career in industry.
Describe the IPPD program in one word.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that ever since I got this list of questions.
Most of your colleagues have cheated. They said, well, how about 3 words?
Oh, damn, I didn't know I could cheat. Rats. Well, then I want to back up and rethink.
But you have one word that would be...
So the one word I was thinking of was authentic, in that it's a real experience like they will have in industry. But it's still very much a learning experience. It's a safe environment like a campus is. There are no multi-million-dollar consequences to failure. Everybody loses their job and the team is fired. But there are high expectations that you produce, and if you don't get there, the consequences aren't as ugly, but there are some consequences. So it is a really authentic experience.
Great. Or anything else, Dr. Law, that you'd like to add? This has been incredibly informative, but were there any other ideas you have on IPPD? Or?
No, I think I got in all my words.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in today. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and I look forward to working with you more on the documentary project.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.